Here I have a recording of drums. Let's have a little listen. Okay, I've already had a play around with this and I've set some EQs in some of the tracks and I've set some levels as well. There's one issue we need to look at first before we do anything else. And that's the issue of this toms track here. And you can see the original toms recording on this track, which I've muted. And here we have the toms which I've effectively gated out. So they're only audible. The track is only audible when the toms play. So let's just have a listen to the original toms track by itself. As you can hear, there's a really huge amount of spill from the other drums. And when the toms come in, okay, when the toms come in, they sound fine. But for the rest of the track, if you listen for the kick drum spill in that. That's really too much. And if I set the toms at a level where they really pop out of the mix, as they often do need to, then that kick drum spill is going to be a problem. So straight away, I'm going to mute that and we're going to use the gated version, which will make the track very much cleaner. So let's go back to the mix window. What we can hear in this recording is it's quite a splashy sound. It's quite a cheap and trashy sound. We have to assume that this is the way the original producer intended it. This is a professional recording of drums, and if they'd wanted it to sound clean and clinical, well, they could have done that. Particularly the snare drum. The snare drum is quite resonant. It's so easy to damp a snare drum that if they'd wanted the damped sound, then they would have done that. So clearly they wanted this ringy, resonant sound. But then we don't want it to excess. Another issue with this track is the sound of the hi-hat. It's rather cheap and trashy, and that's with the EQ on. And the overall sound of the overheads. So we have to accept that this is really quite a dirty sounding drum track, and that's what the producer wanted. And if you want to try and turn this into a clean, clinical track, well, really, you need to get back in the studio and record it all again. So what I want to do here is go through a few of the thought processes that you would use when thinking about EQ for drums. So I'm not going to tweak the levels anymore. Well, I might, but I don't think so. But the thought process is behind the actual EQs that I've set already. But as an example, let's take the EQs out and see what it sounds like. Okay, let's listen to the EQ on the kick drum. When I set these EQs, I did it in the context of the entire drum mix. So I was listening to each drum with all the rest of the drums playing. What you might commonly find is that if you solo the drum and start EQing it from that point, then you'll spend a lot of time and effort on things which aren't really noticeable in the mix and perhaps don't even work towards the benefit of the mix. So it's very useful to work both with all the tracks on and then in solo to see what you're really doing. In this case, what I felt was that the drum already has a certain degree of snap to it, so it wouldn't be a bad idea if it had a little bit more snap. If that's what the producer wanted, then why not make it clearly obvious that the drum's got a bit of a click in that top end? So let's just take this EQ in and out and see what happens. And in the context of the whole mix. Let's just have a little bit of a play around with that setting and see what alternatives we've got. That's really sounding too much of a good thing. Okay, there's the frequency to consider as well. So that's round about where I like it in this recording. I've got a little bit of a boost here in the low end. Let's look at that. What I'm trying to do here is really balance it back up again, because I've put the click into the top end, or I've emphasized the click in the top end, and it seems to need a little bit of bottom end to bring it back up again. And that's the amount I chose. It's not much, but it makes a difference. Okay, I'm going to leave it just a little bit more than I had it originally. Let's move on to the snare drum and see what we can do with that. It really is very resonant in its unprocessed form. So what I'm trying to do here is find the resonant frequencies and then reduce them in level. Quite commonly, what you can do to find a resonant frequency is apply a boost to start off with. So let's take this one and we'll boost it up like that. You can see there, that's actually a little bit lower in frequency to where I originally had it. You can see there, it really is boosting that resonance. So once we've found that resonant frequency, then we can take it down. Maybe not quite that much. And let's do the same thing for the other one. Okay, it's round about there. So the same thing, we can now take that down. Okay, and in the context of the whole track again. That brings it down to a more controllable degree, to my mind, but it depends on your preference and how you like to hear it. Let's just listen to this bit of top end that I've put in here. It's only a gain of 1.5 decibels, but it's over quite a wide range of frequencies from around about, 3.6K upwards. So let's compare that. Yes, it can only stand so much because when I boost that, it's boosting the hi-hat as well, which is spilling into the snare microphone. So sometimes you need to compromise that you want to do a lot, but there's something that's limiting you and means that you can't actually do quite as much as you would like. Let's go on to the hi-hat. I'm going to say that the drummer really needs to get a better pair of hi-hat cymbals. That would be my point of view, but we have to work sometimes with what we're given. So the same logic applies, that what I'll try to do is find the frequency band that's annoying me the most and then cut it. And we can find it most easily by starting off by boosting it. So whereas the snare had quite tight resonances, this is going to be a wider band of frequencies. So I've set a wider Q. That's the kind of Q that I think will work. That's the frequency. That's where it's sounding the most like a trash can lid to me. So that's where I'll reduce it. Okay, so that's mainly leaving these upper frequencies still in the mix. And these lower frequencies, well, there's not much there to start off with. I could cut them just to get them out of the way, but it's not going to make that much difference. In this example, in another example, you might find that the hi-hat has too much low end. It's worth saying that you don't always have to use the hi-hat mic. It's always a good idea to put one out when you're recording it, because if you don't record it and you need it, then basically you've got a bit of a problem there. But if you have recorded it, you can choose not to use it if there's enough hi-hat in the overheads. But in this case, I'm going to use it. The toms, I listened to those carefully and I decided they didn't need any EQ. So it just depends, once again, on the individual case. You might think it needs more, you might think it needs less of certain frequencies, but in this case, I'm quite happy just to leave it as it is. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. If something's okay to start out with, you can just leave it. There's no rule that says you've got to do something to everything that you've recorded. Let's try the overheads. Once again, it's mainly the hi-hat, but what I found was that the hi-hat seems to be catching the overheads at a different frequency band. So there's the hi-hat the hi-hat EQ, I nearly said. The hi-hat EQ, which is centered around 777 hertz, and the overhead EQ, which I've put at 1.35 kilohertz, which is getting on for double that. So maybe there's some harmonics in there that are annoying me. But that was the annoying frequency I found in the overheads. But let's just tweak it a bit and just see. Yeah, I think it's with the full mix rather than listening to the track by itself. I've done something to the hi-hat at one frequency, then it needs a bit at a different frequency in the overhead. So I've covered a wider band in the full mix, and also done a little bit to the cymbals as well, which, to be honest, they don't sound really all that good either, but never mind. The last track here is the room mic. I don't know why people record room mics in mono. It just seems crazy to me when you can just as easily, well, almost as easily put two mics out And then you've got the option. You can use it in mono if you want to. But here we go. We've got one room mic. You know, I don't know how this was recorded, but I'm asking the question, how is there so much kick drum in the room mic? It seems really clean and close up. There's almost a case here for saying, well, yeah, it doesn't sound that good, so why use it? Why bother using it? But if you switched in and out of the full mix, well, let's just do that. It is adding just that extra little bit of liveliness to the mix, and I wasn't going to tweak the levels, but let's just have a go and see what we can do. Yeah, there's a point where it's definitely too much. There's a point down here where you can't hear it at all. And there's a point here where you can just hear that it's making a difference. And my feeling is that that's where it needs to be. So having said that, let's just look at the EQ. I started off with this band here. I just feel that it sounds a little bit less nasty with that EQ in. And then I started thinking about the kick drum. I'm thinking, well, why has it got so much kick drum in it? And I put a low frequency cut in there just to get rid of some of it. Actually, while I'm here, I could just explore the difference in putting a filter in. So we've got a filter here, which is 24 decibels per octave there that I've set. Which is quite a steep slope. And what we can do is we can bring that up in frequency till we start hearing the difference. Actually, it gets to a point where this band isn't necessary. So with that steep slope, you really can get rid of quite a lot of the kick drum. Let's just have a little bit of a play with that. Okay, that's an alternative approach for getting some of the trashiness of the room mic without putting that kick drum in. But mostly, when you've got a room mic in your recording, that kick drum won't be there anyway, not to anywhere near such an extent, so you'll be doing different things to it. So there we have it. We've got the complete EQ setting, so let's just listen to it again and switch it in and out and see what has been achieved. Actually, we don't need to see that because that's distracting now. So what we've done is we've taken a recording which was really trashy and dirty to start off with, and we've made it less trashy, less dirty, and taken it more towards the clean, clinical style of recording. But everything would depend on the context of the song and of the other instruments as well. So working with the kit by itself, you can do a lot, but when you start to bring the other instruments in, then you really are going to have to reconsider what you've done. So there we have it. Let's listen to it again. I'm David Meller, Course Director of Audio Masterclass. Thank you for listening.